Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yay, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we talked about maybe 3 months ago now about like the changes that were coming up with DOS, and now the changes have been implemented, and
Mhm.
you visited Disneyland. So I really would love to talk about your experience. But before we dive into that, maybe we could just start with an intro of you and tell me a little bit about your family and how long you've been visiting Disneyland.
Yeah, definitely. So Nicole with Bibbidi Bobbidi Bestie, and I have a 5-year-old and then a recently turned 3-year-old. So now I have to pay for her ticket. It's horrible. We frequented Disney World a lot, even though Disneyland is closer to where I grew up. But now we're kind of hopping back between both, so I'm getting a really good taste of both coasts of the parks. So we try to visit several times a year if we can, and yeah, the most recent one we did use the new DAS system, and I previously used it for my son, but then also myself. And now we're only kind of falling under where my son is able to use it. So yeah, excited to share how it went.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, you just went to Disneyland, and I know you just requested the access with this new process using the accessibility cast members. How was your experience?
Yeah, so I was super nervous. I think just like leading up to it, even just us talking, there's so much like ambiguity with everything. Yeah, my anxiousness was like crazy wild. And to top it off, for some reason, always like put off signing up for DOS. I don't do the 30 windows because 30 days, I always forget. So I think it was literally like 2 days before it might have been even closer before that. But I was like, let me just call, give it a try. And if not, we'll go stand in line once we get there. Obviously, that's not ideal, but
Yeah.
it's a service that we need that bad that it makes it worth it. So I called and I did the call, got in the queue. It was probably like 6 o'clock. It was
Oh,
pretty late, like evening. Yeah. And so, I mean, their queues, even before all the changes, they were decently long, especially during like times where people are home and after work. So yeah, I hoped for the best. And so I know there's a cutoff time each night that they like kind of advertise for their queue. And that time came, and we got a little message that said, like, we've closed for the evening, but our cast members are still on and going to get through as many people as possible. So if you can, like, still stay on, basically. So I was like, okay, let's go for it. Um, I was like, thank goodness, because we've been kicked off before, like,
yeah.
after waiting hours. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy. So when I requested, like back before we visited the week of 4th of July, I had to wait on 3 different days at a
Yeah.
minimum of 3.5 hours. And it was a very long process. And I, like you, was very overwhelmed. I was
Mhm.
intimidated. I didn't know like what they were going to ask because DOS is so important to us and really is like one of the main contributing factors of how we do Disneyland and how we're successful at Disneyland. And so I just
Yeah.
really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if we were going to be denied. I didn't know what they were going to ask. So I also was very nervous, and I want to kind of go over this with you because I want to ask if this was your experience too. So I just really didn't know what they were going to ask me. So I was feeling very intimidated and overwhelmed. And when I did get on with a cast member after I had waited the third time, I waited 5.5 hours. And thank God I did this at home.
Yeah.
But she asked me, what kind of accommodations does my son receive in everyday life? She wanted to kind of get an overall understanding of the type of support that he needed for everyday things, like how we go shopping, how we wait for, going to movies or anything. And I was very honest. I also felt like I kind of walked the line of like oversharing, but not oversharing because I wanted to also do what was comfortable for me.
Mhm.
Was that the same experience for you as well?
Yeah, so I had gone into it just like really, I don't know, prepared, and again with a lot of anxiety of like, what are they going to ask me? Am I going to like freeze on the spot? Like, but talking myself into, I know my kid, I know what's best for him. Like, I know how we function and, how we've used DAS before. So going into it, I think we finally got on at 9 o'clock, and he was so tired because you have to keep him up so that way he's on the
Totally.
video. Yeah. So he was so quiet, so tired. And the cast member just asked, I can see you're going to Disney soon. What are the reasons that you need DAS accommodations? And I, just with my nerves and everything, I had kind of like bulleted a little, like, something so that way I'm not like rambling, probably oversharing, but not rambling, and just kind of keeping everything organized. And I shared just like what rides look like for us, what waiting in line looks like for us, how his body can kind of react to the like overstimulation, what that could look like negatively for us, or and like how we kind of curb that. So I just shared all of that, and that was really simply like what it was. He didn't really ask me anything else. And so I don't know if it was just me like oversharing, like you're saying,
Yeah.
and just being like really clear about what we do, like on a normal, and like our normal Disney trips prior to. Um, I worked myself for it. I was like, oh, okay. I came prepared.
Yeah, I mean, I did the same because I am a bit of an oversharer, but I also really wanted to like I felt like I had to prove that he really needed the service because again,
Yeah.
going into it, I didn't know what to expect. And
Uh-huh.
I really was like, you know, we're in a special private school for multisensory learning. He receives speech, he receives, occupational therapy, which we've just graduated from. I mean, I went through everything and she said, "Oh, well, thank you," because those were the next questions. So I think like you
Okay.
in kind of being prepared to explain what kind of accommodations your child receives in
Yes.
everyday life, that maybe kind of took care of those questions. I also think
Mhm.
with you, it was late, and I'm wondering like if they wanted to, wrap it
This-
up.
yes. Yeah. So I definitely wouldn't suggest getting on as late as I did. But I can totally see that that could have been like part of the ease that I might have had. Because to me, it didn't feel too different from previous situations.
Yeah.
But the setting, so like, it's a video call once you actually get connected to a cast member. The setting, it looked like how it was previously.
Hmm.
And so I was like, did it change or did they just like train cast members? So yeah, I was like, okay, this feels like it was before, but I know other people have had just such varying
Yeah.
experiences and have gotten turned away. And I think that's what I just like psyched myself out so much with that. Um, but yeah, coming with like our information of what they need to know and what like DAS provides us in the parks, I think that helped me stay on track, but then also just informed them enough of why we're needing the service.
Yeah, and I still think even though like you're waiting a long period of time at home, you're doing it at home. This is still for
Mhm.
me like what is the recommended method,
Oh yeah.
for registering, because now they have the accessibility team in the ticket booths right after you pass through the harbor security line, and they've opened now 3 booths. So I was just there and noticed they've opened another one, and that to me seems even more intimidating to have a one-on-one in-person interview
Mhm.
because I also think that like you're catching an individual like in a moment in time. Like they
Yeah.
may be having a really good day, or for
Mhm.
my son, like if he had his phone or his tablet, like they would probably look at him and say, "Oh, well, he could
You're
stand in
good.
line with that."
Yeah.
So I still think like it's great they have it in person to be able to offer the service so you can register there, but the preferred method, and I highly recommend, is do it at home.
For sure. No, I totally agree with that. Because we walked through security and me and my husband looked over at the line and I was like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
could not. These kids are ready to like get out of the stroller and like run. Like, I cannot imagine having to stand in that line. And I'm sure it takes like a decent amount of time having to have conversation after conversation. Yeah, definitely glad we did it did it on the phone before.
Yeah, because you are waiting in line to get screened first. And then once you are screened, then you have to get kind of, then you go to that one-on-one interview. So I think it really does take a pretty long time. Now that you have DOS, it is eligible for 120 days, which I think is a plus versus
Oh, for
what it was
sure.
before. And when you went to Disneyland and you were using it, did you notice any sort of like negative treatment in the parks at all? Like, how did you feel about using the service?
Yeah. Um, Using it, I mean, this recent time and even before, there's been, I don't know, it's not very common, but Disneyland, wasn't very much some of the rides set up to have like the lightning lane, as we all know, especially like that Fantasyland area.
Yeah,
So there's one specific time that stands out in my mind, and it's funny because I saw another video on this, but we were going over on Alice, and it's like a tight area to begin with. That queue
yeah,
is like super short. So that one though, you can go up. There's cast members standing at the umbrella. You tell them I have my desk, and then they let you through the exit. And so we did that. People are obviously coming out of the exit, and we're going through the exit. And this young woman was like, "This is the exit. You can't get on this way." And we just kept walking because I was like, I understand she's of younger age, so at least it wasn't like an adult being, just rude about it. But I was just like, we're supposed to be here. It's okay. And then you kind of like get up to the exit and I don't know. I felt like eyes like, what are they doing? They realize the line's over
yeah.
here, right? Because like I've thought about that in different situations as well. Like, guys, the line's over here. Like you're not going to cut me. But I try to like come from that understanding. But then we like, there's another cast member, so like another checkpoint, and they merge you into the line. And there's a feeling of guilt there. Like,
Yeah.
but then I have to remember I already waited. Like I waited outside this line. We like went and like, just stood over in this area and watched the boats go by, or we went and did this. Like we technically did wait already. So I need to like remind myself of that. But it was funny. So going down to Disney World, or at Disneyland, my husband's driving. I'm scrolling on my phone on social media, and I see this video of like a mom who's going through the exit and the same ride to get on, and people are like hollering like, dude, that's the exit, what are you doing? And like you could see just she gets so flustered and gets off, and it's like a big scene. And I'm just like, I'm telling my husband, like, I bet she had DAS or something. And then, like, these people are getting on her. And maybe there was like a miscommunication because there are two checkpoints from cast member to actually like merging with the line. Maybe she thought, oh, I just go through and there wasn't a cast member there. And she hops on the exit. I just felt so bad for that mom. And it's like a viral video that like other pages are now resharing. I was just like, I felt so bad because I was like, I guarantee you she's a DAS mom. Like
Yeah.
she had a younger kid with her. She's not just doing it to like cut the line. Like yeah, I didn't think that. And that's how she was being portrayed. And I was like, this is like the feeling that I have felt before on like why I wouldn't want to use it. It's not because like going through the screening or the cast members want, it's more so the other guests that just
Yeah.
don't maybe understand it because they're not in that situation. So you almost have to go in with that mindset of like, these things could happen. And I don't know, with my like, just probably personality and like anxiety of always thinking, I'm thinking to like the Inside Out movie, prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to say if the worst happens? So just going into it of a mindset of that. But yeah, it's those Fantasyland rides that really don't have like a queue and you're going through like the exit or just odd places makes you feel a little wonky. But otherwise, it's not too common, especially if
Yeah.
you're going on rides that have that lightning lane. You really don't stick out. Everyone just thinks you have a lightning lane for it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience a couple of trips ago where we went through the exit line on the teacups, and it was the same situation. It was a little bit of an older woman, and she said, this is the exit line. And I just looked at her and I said, and I have a special pass. Thank you. And I walked on. But for us, since my kids are a little bit older, I know your kids are younger, like we're kind of a close the park family. So we
Uh-huh.
save all of those Fantasyland rides until after fireworks where there are reduced crowds. There are
Yeah.
still lines, but there are reduced crowds. And so I think sometimes like that helps a little bit because, like you said, that area is very condensed and
Hmm.
it can just get overcrowded, just in that, like right by the rabbit's house where you have that umbrella where you go to Alice, and it's the same for teacups. There's nothing for the teacups. Um, one of the things that I wanted to share, and I'm not sure if it's like this for you guys, but for me, like and I think that this is something to just share like with other families, if for us, if there are short queues, we just wait in those lines, like
Yeah.
especially Fantasyland, like,
Uh-huh.
teacups, like after 10 o'clock, it's almost a walk on. And
Yeah.
we do the same for like pirates and other things. Like DOS has really helped my family because my son can't stand in those long lines and also those tight spaces with a lot of people
Hmm.
around. I mean, his output is more of like kind of like an emotional reaction. It
Uh-huh.
has gotten a little bit better as he's gotten older, but I just don't like to put him in those situations because he feels very overwhelmed and embarrassed, and so we kind of time it around that. But I think one of the things that I'm interested from you and also from my perspective is what would you share with a parent who's maybe nervous about asking for those accommodations?
Yeah. I mean, you just got to be, it's not even selfish. You just have to do what's best for your family.
Yeah.
Like, we've, I mean, we always get DAS even if we don't use it, just so we have it in our back pocket. Because, like what you're saying, when we see it's like a 15-minute wait, a 10-minute wait, we're not requesting DAS. We just go stand in the line.
Yeah.
And it's because, like, we're the parents, we know what our kids can tolerate. But if it's something that's like a 45-minute wait, I can completely relate with what you're saying, being in that confined space. And if, something's going to kind of tip the point, it's not going to be pretty for us, but also the guests around us.
Exactly.
And like myself as well, I know my anxiousness just goes when we're put in situations like that. So it's not like I I think a lot of people maybe think about it just as like this is only benefiting one person. It's not. It's benefiting that person, your family, and the guests around you.
Yeah.
Everyone's having a better experience when everyone's needs are met. And if that's applying for DAS, then do it. I
Yeah.
totally think it's worth it. And nerves going into the screening, I get that. I mean, I shared, I had the same nerves.
Totally.
Even though we've had DAS at Disney World, Disneyland for myself, I had the nerves. The worst they can say is no. And on top of that, even if they do say no, my experience has been that they will give you like other accommodations or just other resources that you can use in the parks. So that way they're not like just saying no and turning you away. And that's it. They're there to help you. They really are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I echo everything that you said. I mean, for me, I always think about my daughter. I have an 11-year-old neurotypical daughter, and
Mhm.
we've been very successful at Disneyland with DOS, but it's also helped us like enhance her experience because I never want her to walk away thinking like I couldn't have a vacation because my brother and what he needs. And so to your point, it helps the whole family and also everyone around you. I mean, those accommodations, I feel like this is such a simple accommodation and it's such an important accommodation because there's always a busy time of year at Disneyland. It's getting to the point now that it is busy all the time and it is very overwhelming. And so anything that we can do to help our kids or other people in our party to feel comfortable and to feel, kind of brought along and that inclusive feeling, like that's so important. So I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Where can people find you?
So I am most active on Instagram, posting and then always in stories. But all of my social media handles are bibbity bobbity bestie.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll have another conversation if there's any other DOS changes coming up.
Definitely, definitely. Thanks for having me.